Hey everybody, happy Thursday. We're here with the next chapter of Frendel, chapter 8. Last chapter we saw Nick kind of conducting a little bit of a social experiment. What that means is he was trying something out in society around real people to see if it worked. And it did. He had his friends and himself go every single day into the same store and ask to buy one Frendel. And by the end of the week, the lady working at that store was able to recognize that the word Frendel, for whatever reason, all of a sudden means pen. His experiment is working. I'm thinking now he's going to take the results of that social experiment in the store and bring the idea now to the school. And I'm wondering how that might cause some problems. In fact, this chapter is called Word Wars. That kind of gives me a hint that this is not going to go so well. Now we're going to dive right into this chapter. It's not a very long chapter, but I think it starts to introduce the main problem of the book. So let's get right into it. School was the perfect place to launch a new word. And since this was a major historical event, Nick wanted it to begin in exactly the right class. 7th period, Language Arts. Nick raised his hand first thing after the bell rang and said, "Mrs. Granger, I forgot my Frendel." Sitting 3 rows away, John blurted out, "I have an extra one you can borrow, Nick." Then John made a big show of looking for something in his backpack. "I think I have an extra Frendel. I told my mom to get me 3 or 4. I'm sure I have an extra Frendel in here. But I must have taken it. Wait, oh, yeah, here it is." And then John made a big show of throwing it over to Nick, and Nick missed it on purpose. Then he made a big show of finding it. Mrs. Granger and every kid in the class got the message loud and clear. That black plastic thing that Nick borrowed from John had a funny name, a different name, a new name. Frendel. Okay, so they kind of put on like a little skit. They kind of put on a little show to introduce this new word to the class. Now we know Mrs. Granger loves words the way they are. Maybe a problem. There was a lot of giggling, but Mrs. Granger turned up the power in her eyes, and she swept the room into silence. And the rest of the class went by according to plan. Her plan. As everyone was leaving after class, Mrs. Granger said, "Nicholas, I'd like to have a word with you." And she emphasized the word word. I like that. Again, Andrew Clements loves playing with language. She emphasized the word word. It means when she said, "I would like to have a word with you," she said it like that because she knows Nicholas is making up a new word. So one of the things Andrew Clements does really well is playing with language and all the different ways we can use the same words. Nick's mouth felt dry, and he gulped, but his mind stayed clear. He walked up to her desk. "Yes, Mrs. Granger?" "It's a funny idea, Nicholas, but I will not have my class disrupted again. Is that clear?" Her eyes were lit up, but it was mostly light. Not much heat. "Idea? What idea?" said Nicholas, and he tried to make his eyes as blank as possible. "You know what I mean, Nicholas. I am talking about the performance that you and John gave at the start of class. I'm talking about this." And she held up her pen, an old maroon fountain pen with a blue cap. "But I really didn't have a Frendel with me," said Nick, amazed at his own bravery. And hiding behind his glasses, Nick kept his eyes wide and blank. Mrs. Granger's eyes flashed, and then narrowed, and her lips formed a thin, hard line. She was quiet for a few seconds, and then she said, I see. Very well. Then I guess we have nothing more to discuss today, Nicholas. You may go. Thanks, Mrs. Granger, said Nick, and he grabbed his backpack and headed for the door. And when he was just stepping into the hallway, he said, And I promise I won't forget my friendle again. Bye. Nick is pretty brave. I like that line that he said he was amazed at his own bravery. He's surprised at how brave he's being. Is he being a little, should we say, rude? Perhaps. But it is brave to walk up to your teacher and instead of caving, being like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to disrupt the class, it won't happen again, he stuck to his guns and he said, but I really didn't have a friendle. That was pretty brave of him. Now let's talk about Mrs. Granger and how she handled this, let's call it an altercation. That's kind of like a small issue between two people. I think Miss Granger handled it quite well. In fact, Andrew Clements went out of the way to write a whole chapter called Mrs. Granger. We read that chapter. It was all about how scary and strict Mrs. Granger was. But now that we're starting to learn more about her, I don't think that that's really the case. I think she takes her job seriously. I think she really does think words are important, yes. I'm not so sure I believe that she is this mean, horrible teacher. In fact, she was pretty kind to Nick. She didn't yell at Nick when he was being disruptive at the start of class. She went on with her plans, and she waited till the end of class to have a private conversation with him. And even in that private conversation, she was stern and strict. She said, this won't happen again, are we clear? But she wasn't mean either. She wasn't yelling. She didn't give Nick a punishment. She seems to be pretty fair. I'm wondering, though, if Nick keeps testing Mrs. Granger's patience, if she will keep being this fair about the situation. Or is she going to get more and more agitated, more and more frustrated, and that's really going to heighten our problem? I'm starting to see just a hint, a little glimmer of the problem that this book is going to have. All right, I told you guys, short chapter. We will look at this book again next week. I hope you guys enjoyed the long weekend, I guess. Although, hasn't it all felt like just one long weekend for the last 4 weeks or so? Either way, hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will be doing the next chapter on Monday. Bye.